If one word which explains the budget 2022, then that word has to be optimism. I am saying this as central government themselves push the narrative which states that this budget will eventually write the outline for the next 25 years. And the new word that we have is Amritkal. So hello and welcome. I am your host Parth Srivastav, and today I will be decoding the Union Budget 2022. I will also try to put the clear picture in front of you all so that you all are able to distinguish between truth and the hype. As our Finance Minister Nirmala Sitharaman presented the Union Budget 2022 on February 1st, the key highlights of this budget were capital expenditure, tax on digital assets, and no respite for the middle class. So to discuss all these issues in detail and to understand what's there in the budget for the common citizens, we have Sanchit Srivastav with us, who will explain us the crux of the matter. So thank you Sanchit for joining us. It's a pleasure to have you. So before we get into the details of the budget 2022, I would like to know your first comments on this budget.
Hi Parth, thanks for having me today. So this budget 2022, I must say, is quite ambitious and it certainly relies on optimism. To be honest, in my opinion, neither this budget is historic nor terrible. There are areas where government has given a clear message that we will be focusing on these parameters, so to speak. And obviously there are so many areas where government has sort of maintained silence. But yes, I would like to say one thing, that this budget 2022 is certainly not an election budget.
Okay, so in this budget, the main highlight was the capital expenditure. So my question to you is, how the rise in capex will boost the Indian economy?
Look, capital expenditure is something which was always on the cards. If you see closely, then capital expenditure's budget last year has also been increased by 34%. And this year too, the government has increased the capex by around 35.4%, 2 lakh crore rupees in numbers. So this exponential rise in capex is somehow understandable to me. Because many studies show that if you spend 1 rupees in capex, then you get returns somewhere between 2.5 to 4.8 rupees. So it has got a multiplier factor which eventually helps the economy to grow. To explain the rise of capital expenditure or why capex matters, then let me give you this example to our listeners. For instance, suppose government is making bridge under capex. So to make or construct bridge, who do we need? Engineers, contractors or laborers. And how do bridges get made? Through cement, steel and iron. So by investing in capex, you are not just creating good infrastructure, but also generating employment and creating a demand in the market. So that's why capex matters.
So as you mentioned these figures, which suggest that in last financial year too, there was a 34% rise in capex, and this year there is 35% rise. So if capex was always in government's priority, why didn't it help in creating more jobs back too?
Look, to be honest, we should be pragmatic. Last 2 years were COVID years and we know that somehow our priority was different. But you mentioned right that government had increased the capex budget last year too. And for that matter, government has actually exceeded the capex target, which they had planned to invest around 5.5 lakh crore, but eventually ended up investing 6 lakh crore rupees. From the job point of view, yes, the story is still not completed.
Okay, so now I would like to ask you about the welfare schemes. Do you think that government has done enough in terms of welfare schemes?
Yeah, so welfare schemes are one of the most important factors, and it was expected that after the 1 year of farmers' protest and keeping in mind the upcoming assembly elections, government will take some big decisions for the agriculture sector, so to speak. But the way government actually responded is fascinating. So let's see the numbers first. The government has actually decreased the fertilizer subsidies bills budget from 1.40 lakh crore to 1.05 lakh crore, 25% of the decrease from the last year's budget. And mind you, the prices of fertilizers are not on the reducing side. In fact, there were many reports of long queues coming in newspapers 2-3 months back. Again, food subsidies bill, the budget has been decreased from 2.86 lakh crore to 2.05 lakh crore, an exponential decrease from the last year's budget. And also some other schemes like petroleum subsidy bills have been reduced by the government this year. So yeah, on the welfare side, it is also a big miss from the government.
So, a lot of people are talking about Manrega's budget that has been decreased this year despite high demand. So, what do you think? Why has that happened?
Look, Manrega obviously is a demand driven scheme, and yes, according to the Manrega's website, the households demanding work are increasing. Yet the government has reduced its budget by 25%. The reason for this could be understood from Niti Aayog Vice Chairman's word that this is a responsive government, and if the demand increases, then the budget allocation for the next financial year will be revised. But Manrega's rise in budget should not be considered ideal for the healthy economy, and we don't want many people to just rely on Manrega's forever.
Okay, so now tell me what's there in this budget for the education and health sector, which are considered as the main necessities of any individual's living.
Yes, for the health and education sector, government has increased both sectors' budget, but marginally, specifically for the health sector. Look, there are two ways of looking at it. Some are saying that after having this atrocious second wave of COVID, all we needed was some new health reforms. But what we got is a health top up, where the government has only increased 0.8% of its health budget. And there's another way of looking at it, that we have overcome the good, bad, and ugly of COVID, and now we can move on. For the education sector, government has first of all increased the budget allocation by 12%, which is again being seen in a good light. And yes, there are announcements regarding e-Vidya and digital universities in the next financial year. But there is also one dark area in this education sector, and it is more towards the welfare part, where government has actually reduced the midday meal scheme budget, but it is very marginal decrease.
So, according to you, there are areas where government could have focused more, right? There's a lot of talk happening around the introduction of 30% tax on digital assets. Could you explain to our listeners about the same?
Yes, this decision on virtual digital assets is going to have a lot of discussion for a while now. Many people are already speculating that government has legalized cryptocurrency in India, which is not the case here. Government hasn't brought a cryptocurrency regulation bill, so we don't know about its validation. As of now, what we know is government has put 30% tax on income from virtual digital assets, which includes NFTs and other stuff. So it's not just about the cryptocurrency only.
So, at the end, I would like to know from you what's actually there for the income tax paying citizen. Has government paid any attention on that?
This year, government hasn't touched the income tax slabs, and they didn't give any relief to ordinary citizens of this country. That's again subjective, and government on one hand tried its level best to explain that we did not think of increasing the income tax slab. That in itself is remarkable. So the message is, we have done good by not harming. On the other hand, the tax-paying citizens are more or less disappointed, as they say we have had job losses, salary cuts, yet we are paying the same amount. So yeah, it is subjective to discuss, and I will leave this for the listeners to decide its merit.
Thank you so much, Sanchit, for joining with us. It was indeed an insightful discussion with you. To summarize the good, bad, and the ugly of this budget 2022, one thing which must be kept in mind is that government is not looking to spend more on the welfare schemes, but their inclination is more towards the infrastructure part, where they are trying to generate jobs, create growth, and at the end of the day, you are getting a good infrastructure too. The focus of this budget was more towards the digital push, and after a lot of chaos on the cryptocurrency legality, government as of now has put 30% tax on the incomes from virtual digital assets. Last but not the least, our common citizens of this country have again been left out in the middle of nowhere. They haven't got any tax reliefs, neither have they got any special exemptions in the income tax slabs. So this was the budget 2022 for you. I hope this particular discussion will help our listeners to understand how this union budget affects us. So that's it from our side. You were listening to our podcast. Thank you.